right, welcome back to Module 4. We have been building up to talking about resilience. We've talked about the stress response, how it happens in the body and in the brain, the impacts it can have on us, what happens when we have cumulative or chronic stress exposure, and the negative impacts that can have on the quality of our lives. Now we're at the solutions module. Let's talk about resiliency. Resiliency is basically self-care. It's meeting our basic human needs, which are non-negotiable. We all have them. We can't just make do. We can't get by. We need to address these. Just like a cell phone battery needs to be charged if we want that to perform, we have to charge ourselves by meeting our basic human needs in order to perform. We talked in last section about a quote from Ernest Hemingway, and there's another one that is particularly apropos for people who live in demanding worlds, demanding professions, where their objective is to help others, to perform, to put others' needs ahead of themselves. The quote is that the best people possess a feeling for beauty, the courage to take risks, the discipline to tell the truth, the capacity for sacrifice. Ironically, their virtues make them vulnerable. They are often wounded and sometimes destroyed. But that doesn't need to be the case. People who live with great passion, great meaning, and great purpose can sustain that if they take the time to support themselves, not to put themselves last in the martyrdom type mindset that we see so frequently in healthcare workers and emergency responders and caregivers and teachers, but to recognize that if I really want to perform to my standards, following my values, and I really want to take care of other people, I have to take care of myself first. So this is the module on how we talk about doing that. We mentioned that resilience isn't a one-off, it is a habit, it is a practice. So it is good for us to identify resilience practices that work for us. They're all fantastic, but none of them are great unless you use them. So when we talk about some of the chronic stress impacts on the body, most times we hear from people it impacts their sleep. Really interesting thing is so many responders and other people I talk to say, I don't have a sleep issue. I'm out as soon as I hit the pillow. And they think that's a good thing. It's not. That's a sign of exhaustion. It's a sign that we are completely overwhelming our systems. There should be what's called a latency period, a time between when you lie down in bed and you actually fall asleep. It should be on the order of 8, 10, 15 minutes. A lot of people I know, especially today in our society with our demands, we're out cold as soon as our head hits the pillow. And it's interesting, if you look at the stress chemistry behind that, what's often happening is that we have this chronic level of cortisol. There's other hormones involved, but cortisol is the big one that's keeping our nervous system active, our sympathetic nervous system, where it's preventing us from getting that balance with the parasympathetic nervous system. But over the course of wakeful periods, so when we're awake, our bodies build up a chemical called adenosine. So after so many hours, we build up enough adenosine that the signal from the adenosine is stronger than the signal from the cortisol. And that's what happens when we go to bed. We are exhausted, out cold. But then how many times are you out cold when you go to bed, but 2, 3, 4 hours later, you're wide awake and you don't know why? What's happening is that sleep breaks down the adenosine in our body. So after a couple of hours, the signal from the cortisol, the nervous system stimulation, is greater than the adenosine stimulation. So it wakes us up. When we wake up, we're groggy, we're in a foggy brain, we're more posed to look for a threat because our nervous system is activated. Something's wrong, I've got to find it. Researchers are showing there's usually 3 reasons why we wake up like this. One is that we have the never-ending to-do list in our head, and we'll talk about what to do about that. 2 is we're ruminating on somebody who did us wrong, that person. And for some reason, we are just thinking about that person, thinking about the way they wronged us. We're continuing to amplify our nervous system, and we're not in a real coherent state of mind. The third is that we're catastrophizing. We're waking up, our nervous system's activated, we know that there's a threat somewhere, so our brain automatically starts going to the future and all the things that could go wrong. Obviously, that continues to ramp up our nervous system. So the recommendation is that there's a couple different ways to handle that. If you are waking up and you've got the endless to-do list in your head, grab a pad of paper and a pen. It's way better to write than it is to type it into your phone. Write out your to-do list. Your brain does not differentiate at a significant level between writing something down and having done it. And once you write it down, your brain gets the all clear signal, essentially. I can let go of this now. I can relax. I try, as one of my big practices before I go to bed, to write down a to-do list, all the things I have to do the next day. That I find when I do that, it keeps me from waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning with all the things that I need to do. The other two things, the ruminating on somebody who did you wrong, or the catastrophizing, fearing what's going to happen in the future, that's your nervous system engaged. Writing things down isn't going to help you. At that point, it's recommended that you start sending signals through your nervous system to your brain that everything's okay. There's a fantastic researcher, Andrew Huberman, out of Stanford at the Huberman Lab there, who's done a tremendous amount of work. And he said one of the most effective ways to speak directly to your nervous system is through patterned breathing. And the pattern in particular that he finds that downregulates our sympathetic nervous system is called double inhale, exhale breathing. If you're a firefighter, you were probably taught it as skip breathing to conserve your air supply if you're trapped and you're running low on your SCBA. It does decrease our oxygen utilization, but in large part it does because it decreases our metabolic demand because it's regulating the nervous system. So what you do, and you can implement this at night when you're awake and you're either ruminating or catastrophizing, lying in bed. You can also use this in the daytime when you're starting to feel yourself getting ramped up and elevated. When you're driving in the car is an awesome time to do it. Elevator rides, great time to do it. Nobody knows you're doing it. It's just a double inhale. So through the nose, followed by a slow exhale through the mouth. Double inhale, slow exhale through the mouth. If you monitor your heart rate, you'll find about 40 seconds after you start doing these cycles, your heart rate starts to drop. It's fantastic. If you have some measurement device, Fitbit, Apple Watch, Whoop, whatever, watch your heart rate. This does quickly start to decrease your sympathetic nervous system. It can be the best way when you're awake in the middle of the night to go back to sleep. Easy to implement and practice throughout your life. One of the other interesting things that we find is many people, when they're highly stressed, report, I don't know what's wrong. I got 8 hours of sleep last night and I still feel bad. Oftentimes what's happening there is that nervous system signal that they have this chronic cortisol level, this chronic stress level that keeps their brain vigilant enough that they think they're sleeping, but they're just in the light stages of sleep. They're not dropping into the deep sleep that their body needs to recover. They're not dropping into the REM sleep that their brain needs to recover. So again, implementing breathing practices like this on a regular basis can be a great way to keep your nervous system regulated so you're not accumulating more and more cortisol signal throughout the day. Another great thing to do if you experience this is early on we talked about one of the signs of chronic sympathetic nervous system activation is muscle tension. That muscle armoring that we talked about in post-traumatic stress disorder, but also just chronic muscle tension because our nervous system is telling our muscles we have to be ready for fight or flight. If you are experiencing sleep issues, doing the breathing exercises before bed and stretching. It doesn't have to be a full-blown yoga class. Just stretch the muscles that you know are chronically tight on you, whether it's neck circles, shoulder circles, rolling out on a foam roller, stretching out your hips and your quads and your hamstrings. Loosening that muscle tension sends a signal back to your brain that everything is okay. Everything's a feedback loop. The deep breaths, the double inhale followed by an exhale, sends a signal to your brain saying everything's okay, starts to downregulate your nervous system. So those are two of the best practices. The other big things that you'll hear frequently to improve sleep, try and be consistent as possible in your sleep schedule. Go to bed at roughly the same time, wake up at normally the same time. Try to make sure you have a good sleep environment. Cool. 64 to 68 degrees is supposed to be one of the best temperature ranges for us to sleep in as humans. Try and do that if you can. If you can't, if it's too hot, get a fan. Have some white noise in the background. If you are stressed and your brain's in that hypervigilant state, it's going to be looking for anything that tells you there's a threat in the environment. Lights, sounds, anything out of the abnormal. And if you are an emergency responder or a healthcare worker who's accustomed to listening for tones, alerts, the click of the mic before radio traffic starts, your brain's going to be listening for that when you're stressed. Get a white noise machine, run a humidifier or a fan in the background just to get that baseline steady noise so that your brain can chill out. The other big thing I mentioned is light. Our eyelids are not room darkening. They let light through. We all know if you're sleeping and somebody flips on the light in the room, you see it. Try to make your room as dark as possible, whether it's with room darkening blinds, an eye mask, sleep in the basement, whatever. But make your environment as calm and as stimuli free as you can for a good night's sleep. And if you've prepped yourself well, you're really going to increase your chances of getting into that deep restorative place. Other big resilience practices. It is a big deal. I mentioned tracking. I'm a little bit of a geek, so I keep a little spreadsheet in my journal every day on what of my resiliency practices I did and which ones I didn't. A big one for me is unplugging. Did I turn my phone off for a set amount of time during the day, especially at night? Just like our devices, they need to be unplugged now and then. They need to be shut down to work effectively. We need to shut those down too, especially if you're experiencing that phantom, did I hear my phone ring, or that phantom, I felt like my phone vibrated. Your nervous system is adapted to that stimuli. You need to remove it to allow your nervous system to relax. Journaling. I mentioned it earlier in terms of the to-do list, and writing a to-do list is a form of journaling. It's not all pink diaries with the little lock. It's writing down your thoughts. Again, your brain can relax, can let go of things when you've written them down. It doesn't differentiate at a significant level between writing them and communicating them. For all of us who may not want to share some of the biggest troubles in our lives with others, we don't want to burden them, we don't want to be embarrassed, we feel shame, whatever, journaling is a great way to get that ick out. It's private, it's yours, you keep it wherever you want, but journaling lets you release that stuff, lets you get it down on paper. And many times when we get it down on paper, we see patterns or connections we don't see when it's all jumbled in our head and the thoughts. And it can help downregulate your nervous system, take away those chronic worries, that low-level fear and anxiety that is oftentimes a hallmark of the sympathetic nervous system triggering. Gratitude. I mentioned earlier, we have a negativity bias as humans, so we're always kind of looking for the negative, especially if your profession reinforces that. Gratitude practices have been demonstrated to really downregulate our nervous system and to improve our quality of life. If we force ourselves to look for the things we're grateful for and not just say I'm grateful for them, but really feel that moment of appreciation, to really feel that gratitude, we start to rewire our brain, going back to that neuroplasticity. We're teaching our brain that things to be grateful for is a priority. So now we start to look for them, the way the light filters through a tree, that pretty flower, that cute puppy, all these things that give us that kind of warm flood in our heart. The more we notice those, the more we're going to notice them moving forward. So you can do it just mentally, training yourself to watch for something that you're grateful for, or at the end of the day, writing down 3 things you're grateful for during the day can prime your brain, and that can be another way to help you sleep. Nature. Tons of research out there showing time in nature is tremendously downregulating to our nervous systems. Very, very calming. So try to get out to a park, a garden, if you've got a great yard, go hiking, go to the beach, whatever, and enjoy it. Don't have it diluted with your earbuds in, listening to music or the news. Social media and the news don't tend to downregulate our nervous systems no matter where we are. But really enjoy that time in nature, unplugged if you can. Doesn't have to be a long time, 15, 20 minutes during the day. Perfect. And the last few resiliency habit suggestions we have: exercise, big one. Trying to get some sort of movement into your life on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be hardcore, high intensity. Mixing it up is fantastic. But oftentimes we find when we are in chronically stressed states, we are just stewing in this vat of hormones, basically, especially the adrenaline. We see it in sedentary professions. Dispatch is one that jumps to mind, that they get all the nervous system stimulation that the field responders do, but they have to sit in the chair and answer the next call. So they have the cortisol, they have the adrenaline flooding through their body, but they don't have a means to exhaust it, a means to get rid of it. I know when I was a firefighter, so many times we would go on a call in the middle of the night and I'd try to go to sleep and I couldn't because I was just amped. So I'd do burpees or jumping jacks or run. Finding a physical outlet to burn through those stress hormones can be tremendously beneficial. It also encourages deep breathing and some time that's really just focused on yourself. Entertainment. Oh, that's a big one. Many times when we are stressed, our stress threshold has increased, so we are looking for stimulation constantly. When you're highly stressed and you don't want things to be quiet, you need stimulation, you want noise in the background. Look at the entertainment that you go to. Many times when we're stressed, we'll go to violent video games, shoot 'em up movies, things that continue to amplify the stress signal in our body. And we call it relaxation, but it's not. We're still getting that surge of hormones in our body. We're still activating our nervous system unnecessarily. So choose your entertainment wisely. Sometimes that stuff is fun, but if you're already stressed out, try and find something that's more calming. Maybe reading something that's positive, watching some YouTube videos, listening to music that you really enjoy. Calm music has definitely been shown to have a positive benefit on calming the nervous system. Positive social connection is another resilience habit, and I think it's one of the ones that really went by the wayside in 2020 with COVID. With all the social distancing, we shifted to virtual connections, and virtual connections just don't light up the areas of the brain that in-person, true, authentic connections do. So really making sure that you have some people who are positive in your life and that you engage with them on a regular basis. Conversely, if there are the people who are negative in your life that you don't have to be around, cut them out. Research has shown that positive social connection is tremendous in supporting morale and decreasing stress. But negative social connection is worse than isolation. So don't go there. If somebody's in your life that's toxic or your interactions with them are toxic, cut it out. That can be a resilience practice too. Other things, one of these that I really love is play. When we get stressed, and we talked about this in the last module, we tend to let play go by the wayside. We think that it's frivolous or I just don't have time for that. We need it. It is one of those basic human needs. Find what's fun to you, something that is just enjoyable. It doesn't have to have a purpose other than just pure enjoyment in your life. But the more you can balance out the stressors of your life with things that you just truly enjoy that flood the good hormones through your body, the more resilient you become. Setting goals. Many of us are very goal-oriented, especially if you're in the helping professions. That could be another thing to track. Here is a goal, and here's what I'm doing to move toward it, seeing that there's value in what you're doing in life. Another neuroscience trick that I think is really good, especially if your work messes with your sleep schedule, your circadian rhythm, you can reset your circadian rhythm with light exposure. One of the big things that Andrew Huberman, the doctor I mentioned earlier, highlights is try to get out for 5 to 10 minutes of natural light exposure in the morning, within 2 hours of waking up, preferably before 9 a.m. The reason you want to be out then is you get high yellow-blue contrast, and that sends a signal to your brain that it's resetting your circadian rhythm, that it's the beginning of the day, it wakes you up. Then again in the evening, around sunset, try to get back out for another 5 to 10 minutes of that high yellow-blue contrast light, natural light, to tell your system it's time to start down-regulating, start shutting down, and start producing melatonin for sleep. Really easy kind of life hacks there. Mindfulness practices we'll wrap up with. Mindfulness, I know sometimes gets an eye roll and is viewed as kind of a she hippie thing. It's not. It's been around for as long as humans have been around. And mindfulness is really flow. It's being totally absorbed in what you're doing and shutting down that default mode in the brain. The default mode is where we go to when we're not thinking about anything. And in all species, and each species has a different default mode, we tend to go to the negative. We tend to go to worry, to fear. Mindfulness is a way to engage our brain, to allow it to kind of come offline, to relax and restore. It can be yoga, where you're linking your movement of your body to your breath. It can be traditional meditation, seated or walking, just focusing on your breathing or on a mantra, really just allowing your brain to focus on this one thing and let everything else, all the noise, all the busyness, filter to the side. One of the tricks I found with meditation is I used to try to do it religiously every morning, and I would get so frustrated, mainly because my to-do list was running through my head, and I kept thinking I need to get up and go do this. When I shifted my meditation to nighttime before bed, I meditate for just 5 or 10 minutes. It is so much easier for me to drop into a meditative state, and I sleep better afterwards. So find what works for you. Walking meditations are fantastic. Another thing is breath work. We mentioned it before with the double inhale, exhale breathing. Any sort of breath work causes you to focus on your body and starts to send signals back to your nervous system that it's okay. Again, breath work you can practice anywhere. Highly recommend the double inhale, exhale, but there's tons of other patterns out there. So basically, again, meditation is anything that lets you get into flow. It can be mountain biking, it can be knitting, it can be anything that absorbs your attention. and takes your mind off all of your worries, real or imagined. So mindfulness practices, a huge resiliency building tool and an easy practice to incorporate into your life. I hope this gave you some ideas around things that you can do. Like I said, everybody's best resiliency practice is individual. It's the one that you do, the one that you feel rewarded by, the one that you feel is effective for you, and the one that you engage in and you track over time. You'll find if you practice whatever your chosen resiliency practices are over time, you will have greater capacity to deal with stress, and you will naturally start to experience fewer of the stress-related issues, whether it's depression, anxiety, sleep issues, hypertension, diabetes. Regulating your stress system will have a positive impact on your life overall and your performance as a human. So I hope you found this helpful. Thank you so much for your attention.